Welcome to Architrave Gaming. I'm the Archmaster. Today is going to be something a little bit different. I'm actually going to read from a script. It was a script that I wrote when I was on Reddit and I replied to someone. No, I didn't. I made this. I made a post. Anyway, I'm gonna actually read it, so maybe I won't stutter over myself all the time. Anyway, this video is about doing more with scapes. You know, you have your landscape and the seascape, and the skyscape, and the, what I call the lightscape, which is essentially, you know, the sun. You could call it the firescape, but it's like, that's kind of limited. More like light, it's the lightscape. And there's so much more you can do with these, and I hardly ever see anyone actually doing anything with the other scapes. Like, some people do something cool with their landscape, but kind of rarely. An even smaller percentage does anything with the seascape and actually makes it interesting. It's just flat ocean as far as the eye can see. It's like, all right, well, that's boring. You know, Minecraft super flat world, like that's what the oceans are in everyone's fantasy world. It's so boring. Anyway, that's what the video is about. Thanks for watching. So, landscape. The landscapes of one of my worlds, because, you know, we have like 13 worlds now. The landscapes of one of my worlds are too varied to even mention half of here, but they include ground that grows vertically upward and then lifts off seasonally, joining the clouds and forming sky realm archipelagos, until there are so many that they form a second crust over the earth. Ooh. In other places, mountains grow up from the ground like islands and then lift off into the sky for a season, only to come crashing back down at various speeds to the spot they left, or somewhere adjacent, if the winds have blown them far. This leads to societies who, half the time, live underground, under one of these mountains, and half the time in the open air, because the mountain lifted up and now they're in the sun, because the ground is lifted up. Others stay on the same piece of ground, whether it's on Earth or floating in the sky. So they're living on this island that grew up, and it flies up in the air, and they're still there, and then it falls back and hits the ground, and they're still living on there. Ooh, that's a cool setting, a cool place, cool world building. Like, no one's ever seen that. That's kind of cool. Anyway, others move out of the way when the island comes crashing back down, constantly roaming so as to avoid the rising and falling of the land. So, you know, you have various islands and whatnot that are lifting up and falling down. There are people that like roam and move between them, so to never be on one when it lifts up and never to be under one when it falls down, so they're always escaping. Like, cool world building stuff. Yes, we've seen floating mountains in the air, and maybe there's been a fantasy world out there that I haven't seen where the islands actually land back down and lift up and there's actually some interaction there, but like there's so much more you can do, and they can like form an archipelago in the sky and like form a crust, and like the whole thing can fall back down, and so now you have what's essentially the Underdark, where like this was the surface a second ago, but the second crust landed on us. Like, that's so much cool. It is so much cool. Yes, indeed. All right, next, the seascape. The seascape, the bodies of water in the world, whether it's rivers or lakes or the ocean. The seascape has mountains and valleys, water that rises up and crashes down, water that holds shape, caves and tunnels and fissures in the ocean that lead down to dry depths, moving and taking different shapes in different seasons, mimicking the seasons and biomes of the land. So you can have like water that's shaped like swampy trees and whatnot, or shaped like mountains, or shaped like flat deserts, which is like, you know, the ocean we have in the real world where it's just flat. That's pretty much the desert. It's like a big watery desert. I think the seascape should be so much more interesting than that. You should have like actual stuff going on with it. Anyway, back to it. Mimicking the seasons and biomes of the land, all the while incorporating fish and seaweed and coral and all sorts of features of the oceans into its structure and behavior. Yes, the water behaves, it moves, it changes. It's all about changeableness. That's kind of what water is. Strong currents, water rises, waterfalls that go up and create sky oceans. Isn't that cool? So you can have like water up here that falls down and creates a lake, which you can have the opposite. You can have the water where it just rises up and forms this, it just pools in the sky and forms a sky ocean. And then it can evaporate up and make clouds above it. Like sky oceans, you have like the tides coming in above you, you just look up and you're like, that's so much cooler than just boring water. It's like, this is so much cooler. And they can like move over the land and whatnot, like sky oceans, sky lakes, sky seas, sky rivers. The world has to be three-dimensional. You have to mix the different scapes. It can't just be, here's the land, and here's the water, and there's the sky, and never shall they meet. It's like, no, mix them, make it fantasy. All right, anyway, you can tell I'm excited. Strong currents, water rises, and thick clouds above and below sea level, clouds below sea level, all support sea life. so that the rain may bring with it a bounty of fish. Raining fish as well as raining water. Yes, in my world you can have fish that are like swimming around in the clouds, and when it rains, the fish just fall with it. And then they like dissolve into a puddle of water and then evaporate back up and reconstitute into a fish. Because yes, in my world, the creatures in the world are elemental. Like, they are elementals-ish, kind of, and humans are the combination of all four elements, so they are like the perfect elemental, which is what material is. Material, like the material plane and material bodies, is just the perfect combination of all four elements. That's what material is. And so that's what why humans are material, and why the material plane is material. It has all four elements. But everything is still technically elemental, and you have some things that lean more toward one element or the other, like fish definitely have more water and less earth in them. That's why they can sometimes change into water and this and that, right? So much cooler to have a fantasy world. And then if you know anything about the weather and the elements in my world, each element is magical. They actually have a certain number of, like, every element has a certain number of spells that are actually attached to the element, like, you know, like fireball sure is a spell, but it's pretty much just conjuring fire. There's a spell like Longstrider in D&D 5e where your movement speed increase. That is a spell effect, right? That is tied into air. So if like the wind blows on you as like a part of the weather, boom, the spell Longstrider was cast on you, and now you can run fast because the wind hit you, right? Like all of the elements in the world, if someone pours water on you, you can turn invisible because, you know, hiding and invisibility and whatnot is tied to water. And so, like, because all of the elements have spells in them, casting spells is just like mixing and matching certain elements and whatnot to have the desired effect. But the really cool thing is all this stuff happens naturally, right? You can walk out into a snowstorm and turn invisible, or go underground and just like get petrified and turn to stone because, oh, you stepped on that piece of stone and it cast the petrify spell because petrify is part of stone, right? The world is so much more interesting and dangerous and like, it's fantastic, super cool. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. Adventurers venturing into the seascape are met with such a variety of challenges that most are dumbfounded, but the treasures of the oceans and wandering rivers and sky oceans of the world include sky pearls, the life-giving gills of invisible sky sharks, and sky squid ink. Yes, we have invisible sky sharks in my world where you see like a cloud and whatnot, and then there's like it parts. It's just cut through by an invisible fin of an enormous shark, like the size of a football stadium. It just swims through the air and cuts through the clouds. It's like, oh, we want to make sure we don't mess with him. It's like, invisible sky sharks. It's one of my favorite creatures. All right. Speaking of that, the airscape. The airscape has what we call planes of force. Solid air that takes the shapes that we're used to in landscape. Mountains, valleys, caves, hills, and gorges, all invisible contours of the airscape. Many creatures, not dwarves or others made of stone, can ride strong air currents up to the skyscape, and or walk off the edge of a high mountain onto the invisible planes of force and explore the sky. So like, you know, you're up on a mountain and like there's wind blowing and whatnot, and you're like, oh cool, there's like elemental air here, there's magical air, cool. You just step off the mountain onto this invisible plane of force, and you're like, now you're walking on the skyscape. Dwarves can't do this because they're made of stone, and so they just, like, they fall through the air. They really don't hover up there. But maybe humans, if you're adherent to air, and of course other air creatures like the bird races, the avians and all that, they can all walk on these planes of force naturally. Some can even walk on clouds. They're just so cool. Anyway. Some who attune themselves to elemental air find themselves able to see the skyscape, as well as the currents of the wind and the creation of the weather. People build whole civilizations on these planes of force, but there is conflict with those floating islands that invade the air's territory, because that's Earth in the air. It's like, you're not supposed to be here, get out of here, but you know, what you gonna do? Fight them? Yes, they do. Next, we're on to the lightscape. The lightscape is unsafe to tread upon for most creatures. It is not simply something you stand upon. How dare you even think that? It's something that abducts you. It is aggressive, spreading like fire through brush, taking your feet out from under you and moving you along, usually upward. The lightscape is more like aggressive spurts of levitation that thrust things upward, as well as spreading out and attacking anything nearby. Yes, the lightscape. Like if you have a building and the sun rises and light shines, the building could just get like punched and like lose bits of stone because the lightscape is like aggressive ground that just like, we have a flood where water comes in and it floods things away. It's very gentle though, it's very soft. The lightscape is like that. Where instead of like the seascape of water that encroaches on, no, the lightscape is like, we're just gonna smash things. It's very aggressive. It's like fire. Things just catch fire and they're destroyed and cracked and broken. You can be walking along and get hit and like, you walk up into a wall that essentially is walking into you and punches you in the face. You're like, oh boy, that's part of the lightscape. Let me move. It's kind of like if you had walked into a tree or walked into, a stone and didn't see it. It's like that, where the lightscape takes all sorts of shapes, but it's always moving out and it's always aggressive and whatnot. So it's like, you really have to avoid it. It's so much cooler. Anyway. The fiery sun. We're going to a different topic in the lightscape. The fiery sun rises and reveals thorny, serrated plants made of red fiber, obsidian-like glass leaves, and nourished by ember coal roots. They spread aggressively, but disappear in the absence of light. A dungeon entrance might be entirely blocked by these red plants that only exist in direct sunlight, making nightfall the only time you're able to enter. Other people use torchlight to temporarily revive these plants in the absence of sunlight, and they even build structures, and the equivalent to rope bridges across chasms that you must have a torch in your hand to cross. If the light goes out, the bridge ceases to exist and you plummet. Isn't that so cool? Yeah, you have plants and the lightscape and we'll even get to light creatures. You have all sorts of stuff made, from light, and it exists as long as there's sunlight on it. But when the sun sets or you're indoors or underground, etc., those things still exist, but they're not just invisible, they just aren't there anymore. Like your hand passes through them, they aren't there. But if you light a torch, you have light, because fire and everything. Like if you haven't noticed, this is earth, air, water, and fire, right? So if you have any source of fire and light, then it revives and you can see it again. So if someone constructs a rope bridge made of these like thorny red plants and they make it across a chasm, it'll only exist as long as there's light. So if you're underground and there's just a chasm there, you light a torch, boom, there's a bridge, but there's only a bridge, within the radius of your torch light. And in my system, it's 15 feet of dim light. So, which is like much closer to how a torch actually works, by the way. So anyway, you have your torch and you're walking along the bridge and it only exists while you have the torch. And if there's like a strong wind that blows the torch out, the light goes away, so does the bridge, and really cool. The stuff you can do with the lightscape and like plants and animals and structures and the actual scape itself, it's so much cooler. Anyway, Lastly, there are also fiery creatures that exist in the lightscape. Outside of direct sunlight or firelight, they enter a dormant state, but they can stay alive and awake, as long as there's sufficient firelight to sustain them. If you're chasing one of these creatures through a town, you'll see him as long as he's in sunlight. But he'll disappear when passing through the shadow of a building, and then appear on the other side. They can go through shadow like we can go through water, by holding our breath. They can do it by essentially holding their breath. They just go into somewhere dark, and they disappear. And it's kind of like, Frodo putting on the ring. It's like, you're in the world, but kind of not, and that's kind of their thing. They leave the light, and they're in this weird world of shadow, and they can get to the other side, and they're back in the light again, and they become real. It's short-lived, but it can be done. Anyway, that's the video. Thank you for watching. Scapes are really cool. There's so much more you can do with this. I haven't even scratched the surface. You know how people take the landscape and they, take a bunch of stone from a mountain and build a castle with it? Well, what happens when you take the lightscape and you build, locations and castles and landscape and whatnot out of it? What happens if you take the lightscape and you kind of contour it to the landscape and imbue them together? People take minerals and stuff from the earth and they make, like iron swords. You could take minerals, or the equivalent in the lightscape of the actual fiery landscape, it's lightscape, the firescape. You can take those and make weapons out of them, or gems, or magic, or all sorts of things, right? The sea actually having valleys and rivers and contours and whatnot, it means you can't just sail along. It's like there are drop-offs and rises everywhere, so you have to actually navigate. It's not just boring, flat, go wherever you want. It's like, no, you have to actually choose, because there's up and down, and they're changing and stuff all the time. That might be a pit here, and it might be a mountain tomorrow, and so you have to get to it right when it's in that middle thing. And if the seascape starts rising up while you're sailing on it, you just start slipping off. It's like, Like, can you imagine a video game or a movie or a TV series or even just tabletop? Like, I know a lot of these things don't translate to tabletop super well, but like, there's so much potential here. This is one of the coolest worlds ever. Like, yes, it's mine and I'm tooting my own horn. This is one of the coolest worlds ever. The amount of actual fantasy, it's like, no one's ever seen this. This is so cool. It's amazing. It's epic. There's so much you can do with this. And then you throw in fantasy creatures, and you throw in fantasy weather, and then magic and spells, and like, it'll just be amazing when I actually get the funding to make this. Anyway, I've kept you here long enough. Thank you for watching, liking, and subscribing. We have a Discord server where there's already one free PDF to enhance your 5e games. I probably won't make a lot of these, but there's one for you for free on the Discord. And please join my Patreon. I need money. I need a lot of money. I need to quit my dead-end job at Walmart, and I need to work on this full-time and actually make books and visuals and pay artists. I need to do so much to make this real so I can make money off of this instead of having to hurt my feet pushing carts for another 6 years. Because I've already done it for 6 years, and I'm really looking to be done with that and go to this. Anyway, thank you all for watching. Thank you for liking and subscribing and feeding the algorithm. And y'all have a good day. God bless.